myself. Yes. Okay. So that's for the announcements. I was going to do this thing. I was watching a video series. I was just looking at some stuff. The guy that wrote, and you would know the two tools because we've used them heavily in here, CSS Tricks. The guy that wrote this site, his name is Chris Corriere. He also wrote CodePen. So the same developer of this site and CodePen did like a conference, and he was talking about how to think like a front-end developer. And really, he was talking about, which was really cool, they took different front-end developers, and when they looked at something, they saw different things. They saw different designs. Somebody saw fonts, somebody saw layouts, somebody saw reusable components. And I was just going to play like a minute of it. I'm not going to play a lot of it, but
when they think of that design, here's a design. How would a front-end developer approach that?
This is like the definition of sort of component-driven UI. I feel like it's like I would have a class with this, just sort of going through and dropping this whole thing up.
And it's about components. How much is that?
The first thing I see is lots of media objects. Media objects, for those who may not know, it's an image or a piece of media with some content right to the side of it. And I feel like most of this design can be accomplished with creating a media object. And the only thing that kind of changes is how big that piece of media or content is.
Just thinking about CSS patterns that can be used heavily throughout the efficient CSS.
Instead of seeing green characters in a matrix, I see HTML characters. That's literally where I start. And
so you immediately start outlining like H1, H2, or
probably if the stage is more heading, that's a list, that's an ordered list because of the nature of it. You know, over there is maybe an unordered list. You know, this is, and especially for the design, this particular design is a lot of lists.
Lists. Eric sees lists all over this thing. He's probably right about that. Staying near the whole thing.
I see a lot of typography, and I'm already thinking about the type system.
Sam went on to say that that's like a at the moment kind of a weak point for her, and so she wants to start with the type system on purpose. She wants to get that set, you know, and then move on to her things that she's done.
For me, I think this is kind of fun, like especially when if you have to consider a variety of screen sizes, like the menu on the left. You know, there's like the Windows deal where like I've seen like where the menu kind of half collapses and maybe it goes to just icon. That may not be helpful in this context. So how can we sort of have like almost like what's the tablet width going to do?
Yeah, Trevor always talking about that. Like something that's easy to think about extremes of what things are going to do, but he's very into the really subtle in between the more responsive design.
I missed that there. They go on to like analyze two more where they get the feedback from front-end developers. And so what you'll see is you approach it differently also. Some of you might see design and like grid patterns, and others may see a flexbox design, fonts, HTML elements, and structure. So there's a lot to front end, and this was just a bigger discussion in the world that development is kind of diverging, like this front end, back end world, and what they expect of a front end developer is like if you were to go for a front end job, you have to know JavaScript algorithms. You're going to have to know how to do something like FizzBuzz, reverse a string of text. That has nothing to do with your ability to like design a website, but that's almost a requirement these days for front end web development. So they're just talking about the great divide that's happening there. So I just thought it was a really cool, it was a really long one. Sweet. Okay, so where are we at here? Homework review, think like a front-end developer. So for the homework review, so I was just gonna take a look at some of the submissions, just take a look at some of those designs. This was Emma's. I was looking at it earlier, trying to help with it. And once again, the design looks like outside of this. Does anyone off of their designs know how this image could go the full width? With 100%, right? So I did see some people struggling with the widths of things, and you know, you just target this. I don't know why it does that. I target the image, and if I just did width 100%, it would make it that large. Okay. I saw some hard-coded image sizes there also. Once again, I want to keep it fluid. I want to keep it responsive. Yeah.
If you scroll up, how did you get the lines between
These lines?
No, the navigation.
Oh, these lines. Oh, let's take a look and see. I don't know why it's acting all weird like that. I'm going to get off of this responsive. That's why it's doing it. So if we go here, there are anchors, and then I would just go here and see, right? Do we have border right? Here we go, border right. That's it. Just a border right, 1 pixel solid white. So they're anchors, and you want to get that color. So you could do border right. Maybe you could have even had, if I got rid of border right, maybe margin right, I don't know, 1 pixel. And because I'm pushing it away, the color behind it, right? The nav doesn't have a color. So the white of the page bleeds through the nav. And since these elements are sitting on the nav, you see the white. So there's a few ways to do that design right there. Either one would have worked, right? 1 pixel, right? 1 pixel. I don't know why it keeps this here. Yeah, so either way. And I'm just going to take a look at the wrapper because that's where grid was applied, right? So we have grid here. That's our grid design. And you can clearly see where the grid kind of starts, where the grid ends. This is how I would say most of the people that I looked at today, and I think I looked at about 6 of them, provided some feedback where I just looked at it, did it. There's three rows and 2 columns. That's really it, 2 columns and 3 rows. And one of the things that I did point out, if I looked at yours and you needed it, there's this auto, and we had gone over auto. What does auto do when I determine it as a measurement for the row? What does this do? The size of the content, right? So this adjusts the heights based on the size of the content. If you hard-coded this, if you were like, I just want it to be 100 pixels, and I go here to the wrapper, right? Now, the grid is 100 pixels, it's row, but the content bleeds outside. So these rows act like, think of them like a div. Like if you created a div, naturally the div is the height and width of the content, right? If I don't give it a width or a height, it becomes the width or the height. The minute I give it those dimensions, the content inside, if it grows past those dimensions, because you have a paragraph and all of a sudden you gave it like tons of padding and margin and now it's like pushing out everything, then it's going to push outside the elements, okay? I mean, there's a way to force those things not to be seen. There's an attribute called overflow hidden, where if there is overflow, it hides that content. Okay, so I wouldn't force this thing to be that 100. I would have said something like auto, and then it just naturally fits that content, right? It's just going to naturally fit it. And, you know, maybe we could have even done auto for, I don't know, the main. You know, maybe we could have done auto for main as well. We have main, and then we have footer, right? And then footer is the last one. And so footer is pretty big, right? So footer, does it really need to be 1 FR? Maybe not 1 FR. That's just a lot of footer for these tiny little things. So maybe you want to do, I don't know, 100 pixels or something. Maybe at that point in time, 100 pixels on the footer. I have to go back to wrapper to go here. Yeah, so it's at 150. So maybe we would just change this to be, I don't know, maybe 50 pixels. And then the footer is much smaller, right? Okay. And then these elements over here also. I think what I did see a few times was that I don't know if I have a working example of it, is that I saw the row kind of stop here and the content bleed out. And it was the same thing. What I noticed was this image was too big and it was pushing itself outside. So I visually saw this blue line coming down here, like a line with blue, which represented the grid, and then I saw content coming outside of it, and that represented that stuff was pushing out. And I only discovered that because I would go, I was trying to figure out problems. I was like, oh, how do you fix that? What's that? I would go to the aside and just start deleting these things. I would get rid of one of these things, and I didn't see anything happen. I would get rid of this. And then all of a sudden, I saw the content fit and the row collapse, and I was like, oh, it's the thing. Then I asked myself, what's inside of this ad? An image. And I was like, all right, well, what if I give the image a width of 100%? And the minute I did, boom, it fit nicely inside of the content, right? So here's the image. See? Image width 100%. This may have been the solution. I don't know. Maybe when I was working with, taking a look at this earlier, I might have implemented this. Emma might have implemented this. I'm not really sure. I forgot. I don't know. I did so many of them today. I just don't really know whose was what. Let's take a look. So Stewart's. I like the design. I like the changing colors too. I think it was pretty nice to wing it. If you want to change colors, you want to use a different image, you want to do different things, do different things. I'm all for you doing different things. I'm just going to go to full page view. It's a little on the wide side, but it's not. Once again, if we just take a look at it, we'll see. I think this also becomes that. See what's happening there? This is one of those, right? I didn't know that this was one of those. I just, like the design. I had Slack to it. I was like, yeah, nice design. I like it. But this, perfect, right? And then this is just grid gap. And then this. And so that got me thinking, like, what's causing that? And all of a sudden, you go to the thing, and I have to play around with it. And I'm like, all right, well, let me go to the thing that I think is causing it. And I did give the logo 100%. So I have to ask myself where else that is coming from. I'm not sure now. Does look good, right? I mean, that's the aside, but when I come up here, it does look like something is pushing its way out. So I go to the wrapper, and maybe we take a look. Maybe it's in the wrapper. I don't know, the columns are like 80%, 20%. That looks pretty legit, right? It's just percentage that should. I don't know if I would have changed this. Maybe if I change this to be, I don't know, 2FR, and I change this to be 1FR. I'm just, winging it, just seeing. Does that change it? All right, well, that changes it. Maybe I change this to 3FR, and bloop. And now it does fit. Just one of those things. So percentages didn't work as well as doing the fractional units, right? Because now it does fit in there nicely. These are just one of those things. You'll get used to it as you work with it. I can't really tell you why that happened. I'd have to research and see why the percentage and the FRs didn't work. I'm not 100% sure why, but I know playing around with the things to see what fixes them leads me closer to figuring it out. This could be a whole blog article. Designing and using percentages uses fractional units, right? Once again, same thing, same design, 2 columns, 3 rows. Right? I even see here, like, the third row is like this 20FR, and I don't really think the 20FR is what we think it is. Like, I think if I maybe change that to 2FR, maybe that would work. I think Darren, you had said, oh, change it to 20, and it was 20. I was like, doesn't change it. 2FR does the same trick, right? Doesn't really change. I think the last one that I have here was Maria's. And same thing with the image, right? Do the image. If we gave it an image of 100%, that would fix that. I'm just going to go to the wrapper. Yeah, there we go, the wrapper. Same thing. That was the general design. And then obviously it would have been the nav where we would have seen Flexbox, right? So there's Flex. If you give each one of these elements, I did see a lot of this, maybe where I saw maybe some people struggle where they didn't maybe have Flex on, or they didn't adjust the size. I think there's justified content here probably, right? Yeah. So if I get rid of justified content, I saw that on some of them, and I made the suggestion, well, you have Flex turned on. If you have Flex and you want to create or take that extra space, just go to the elements themselves. Remember, Flex is a parent-child relationship. You turn it on the parent, and the parent has attributes like justify content, align items, but the children also have the ability to determine if they are going to take the rest of the free space, right? And so they'll take the rest of the free space. Okay? Even without that padding. I mean, the padding is just top and bottom, but the width is what we're dealing with. So you can easily fix that with these small little adjustments, okay? And the same thing I would probably say is happening down here, right? Nav at the bottom, display flex. And these are more nested towards the left. Maybe that was the design. I'd have to take a look at the picture. If that's the design, then that's, you hit it. You know, if it was supposed to be spread out, then spread out. But I think it was like that, right? And then just these images, right? You target that image, you give it, oh, it is width 100%. So let's see why it would not. Oh, you have max width at 100%. So does anyone know the difference between max width and width? I know I did see several max widths and I saw widths. I don't know, you have used it, Joe. I'm just curious. Max width means that the image itself is going to be 100% of its legitimate width. Like that is the image. So when somebody cut the image, that's the image. That's them cutting the image. That's the size of it. That's it, without us unadulterating the size. But if I change this from max width, if I change that to width, then it takes up the full space. It adjusts its own dimensions, its height and width, to take up the full space. Okay, I think the other, was just looking at other articles and they were like, yeah, if you do like height auto, it'll also keep it, but height auto doesn't do anything for us here. So that's another thing. Max width forces the image to be a certain width, the width that it was born to be, and then width itself will allow it to grow in size. Just a few little nuances that you might see along the way, okay? I don't think that would have changed. Doesn't change our grid, right? I mean, everything looks good. We just filled in some empty space there, okay? So, and same thing, same design, right? 3D FR, 1FR, auto, 1FR, 50 pixels, same design, okay? What was probably the most challenging thing here then? It was so easy, you just like, boop, boop. The image? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, you know, week one might have been images, right? I think, you know, I wasn't here for when Brian was doing it, but I did stress to Brian, like, do images and background images, because both of those are two things that you need to know for images. And if you do images, you're going to do a width to the image to take up the percentage. Like, that's something. There's also other image properties like object fit that force the image to stay within the confines of it. So there's other things. Anything else?
For me, it was getting everything centered, like you saw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Center is a big deal, right? Anything else? Did you have your?
Yeah, I was gonna say the article in the first letter was in March.
Oh yeah, this letter right here. So we were talking about that before class, and that in itself is called dropcast. So as part of the design was really, can you get grid, can you get flexbox, can you get the image, can you do all that? And then this was just like icing on the cake. And if you just Googled, you know, first letter of paragraph, right, uppercase, CSS, you're gonna go to like text transform, manipulate, capitalize the first letter of sentences in CSS, Stack Overflow is a site you go to. They're really doing what it is. If you copied and pasted this, you would see. And then if you really wanted to know the nuances, when you do copy and paste it and you see this, right? Once again, we didn't cover floats. If we were doing the layouts 2 years ago, if I was teaching the layouts that we had done, both in Flex and Grid, we would have been doing it solely using display, inline block, and then the next time we did it, we would have done it with floats. We wouldn't have done it with Flexbox. We wouldn't have done it with Grid. Okay, so if you were taking this class 2 years ago, you wouldn't be learning Grid, period. And Flexbox might have been like sprinkled in just as a new thing, like here. Just wasn't part of the curriculum because it was, you know, this other stuff was being used predominantly. What if you started playing around with these and you're like, oh, what does float do? Oh, wait, float's kind of weird. Oh, we know what font size does, and what does line height do? Oh, it moves it around. Like, you start just unchecking these things and you see what they do, and then you start understanding what they're doing, right? And now you have what it is. Your padding, right, and color are probably the easiest things for you to wrap your head around, and font size. So the only two anomalies here. And we've used line height to center things before, okay? Right? Line height was to center, and we could use flex box to center too, right? Line items center. And then float. Float was the new thing. And so, once again, you Google floats, and you'll see, like, float allows text to wrap around an element.
Could you use first type?
Oh, yeah, so in that article, like right here, they go first letter, and I think there's a first of type here, but in the article, this DropCap article, he goes through doing it as a span, right, just like we discussed, and then he goes further down, and he does it like this. The first child means the first paragraph, so if there were multiple paragraphs in the article, grab the first paragraph, and then grab the first letter of that paragraph, okay, and then you would have it. There is no, I was looking for a design to change a bunch of colors, like we're building out those little Instagram posts, and so if you had something like this, my thought was, hey, I got first letter, maybe I could do something like this. We saw a design where we saw a bunch of colors, and I was like, hey, it'd be really cool if we could just target each one of these in CSS, right? Instead of like putting spans around these things and then targeting them, like, hey, this could be first letter, or maybe they have last letter, maybe they have nth letter, right? But they don't. So I look for it. There is something like initial letter, but it didn't work. I implemented it. It's an article, but it doesn't work, so the spec isn't there yet. So that's drop caps, okay? But if you wanted to do this, if we wrap them in spans, right? Because that's how you did. That was one design. If we wrap this in a span, and that in a span, and that in a span, then we could use nth of type. We could target all of those letters, but just, it's more typing, it's more HTML for us. I'm starting to lean towards just doing CSS. If I can just do CSS, I do CSS, and I try to pull away from like adding all this additional stuff to HTML, because it gets really tedious putting all these things in HTML when I could just target them in CSS. Okay. Cool. Keep with your submissions. We're going to provide feedback for some really good feedback for this one, because this one kind of was the accumulation of all the things that you had learned up to this point. And so I want to give you as much feedback for this one as you think about your final project too, right? Final project. All right. So we will start to discuss, oh, how about, you did work in groups last class, right? Did you implement the design of your group? Did anyone implement the full design that you drew on the board? Hands up. Who implemented the design as it was drawn out? All right, only 2. So everyone else went their own route? Okay. Once again, the idea was to like think it through, and then when you're faced with it, you're like, I don't know, I think I'm gonna change this thing. I think I'm gonna do this other thing. Like, seeing it and drawing it out is gonna be different sometimes than when you apply it, okay? So, mobile. So, okay. So we just did that. Did our fashion blog. And once again, I do have some of those posts in here, the fashion blogs that we just looked at, so you can take a look at them. So why, discuss mobile. Mobile's responsive. So there's just some articles, I post in here, you can read them. How to be mobile first in 2019. And they go through, and one of the big things, in my last class, I had somebody that worked for a company that did SEO, and the student just kept emphasizing the importance of SEO. SEO is big, so when you're talking front-end design, you're talking the need to also think about SEO. You're just like, I'm just gonna put a bunch of elements here, and I'm gonna design, and that's great, but that's not great. Like, do you want them to find their website in a search, right? Do you want them to come up as number one or hit the first page? Because if you don't, no one's ever going to find you, right? So SEO is a big deal, and SEO for mobile is also a big deal as well. And so things like, you know, search engine optimization for a mobile search engine, right? Optimizing the content for better ranking of your web pages. These are all really important things. I'm not going to go into all this, but they, you know, they talk about mobile, right? 51%, 43%, 4%. So a lot of people don't use tablets. That makes kind of sense, right? You're on your phone, walking around the house, you're on your phone. You're not walking with a tablet in your back pocket, or you're at your desktop at work or at home. So this is what you should be considering when you're doing that. You can read the rest of the article because they do go into like what determines Google ranking and what drives those sales, and you know, mobile SEO affects voice search. So you can just take a look into that. I'm not going to go into it, but this other article I just wanted to pull up to discuss the other specific design trends for 2019. Once again, so you have an idea, and those things are mobile first is number one. The other thing we're going to be doing today, responsive design. We're also going to get into like CSS transitions and animations. These are also another big thing, right? We didn't really do typography design, gradient design. We just don't have time to do all those things. But we are going to spend a little bit of time on some of these things, right? That's important. I'll talk to you about speed when we get to JavaScript and linking JavaScript, and where we link it is important. So we're going to get into mobile now, and when we do get into mobile, we're going to be discussing breakpoints, and I'm just going to pull this up here. When we talk about media queries, we have certain breakpoints on the page, okay? And breakpoints are these. So I'm going to go to the Food Sense website. So everyone go to the Food Sense website. I'll slack it out. Food Sense, link. All right. If we're going to work with mobile, first thing that we want to do with mobile is this. Go to Developer Tools. Open up Developer Tools. All right. So here's Developer Tools, right? We've been using this little select an element, right? This little thing over here is the one thing we've been using all this time. Select an element. I do it all the time. I go take a look at everything, right? The other one is this. Toggle device toolbar. And watch what happens when we toggle the device toolbar. It changes the page a little bit. And at the very top, we have these little gray bars with lines between them. Okay? And it's telling us right now that this page is at 2560. Once again, it's being projected on this big screen. It's at 2560 and it's 808. So it's 2560 wide, 808 high. And so if I hover over like these gray lines, right, I can see that this changes it. Now, if I click on this, it changes the layout. Okay, it did change it a little bit, right? So if I go back to this really big one, it's a lot of white space on either side. If I go to the laptop L, 1440 pixels, that's how it would look on a laptop. And these are going to represent our media queries. This is how you're going to be building. You know how I was like, when we were doing CodePens, I would like have my CodePen open and then have your CodePen open. Now when you develop, you're going to have your CodePen open in full page view and another tab with your editor view, so that when you're looking at your mobile site, you can bounce around between these to see those nuances. So if I go here to tablet view, right? If we go to tablet view, see what happens. Things changed, right? Something changed here. A few things actually changed. Things moved around a little bit. And we're just looking at the top part. I mean, there's more to the website down here. If we go here to mobile L, 425 pixels, things change even more. There's changes. There's transitions, right? Mobile M, you can keep on going down all the way to that. And so this is the tool we're going to be using for mobile. This is our tool. So what I want to do is this. Oh, good, repeat. Code along, but not really. I think I had it in here. Some questions. Oh, did I miss it? All right, there we go. So we're going to try to emulate some of that design. We're going to start with, I'm going to slide this out. Here's a code pen. Oh, is this the one that has the colors? All right. So I'm just to zoom in a little bit so we can see, right? Okay. So let's examine what's happening here in just the HTML. All right. So in the HTML, I have 3 divs. I have this media query at the very top. See that media query? Now watch what happens when I move the screen. See how it changes? See how that number changes? That's JavaScript, by the way. I have an H1 up here. And in JavaScript, a little bit of JavaScript is all we need. And this JavaScript has a resize event. It's listening for resizes. And when it hears a resize, it grabs the width of the window, and then it grabs the H1, and then it sets the H1's content to be that new setting. So the slightest adjustment here triggers a resize. 1 pixel change changes this thing. So this JavaScript is constantly listening. We're going to learn all about what happens with this when we get to JavaScript, okay, in events, because they're really big. Events are big, okay? And so we have three divs with paragraphs, and we're going to change these things to do different things, all right? Nothing really changes now, and our ultimate goal is to excuse me, do this. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to here, and if I go all the way here, do you see the color change? So this is dark blue, kind of darker green, darker pink, and as I go out, they just changing colors. I go further out and further out, right? So I have a few settings here where you'll see them change. You start seeing them change? See the changes in color? That's media queries. So I've included in this particular design some media queries that are adjusting the background color. We could adjust any properties. I can make the width and the height and the font size all change dynamically based on these little media queries, okay? We're just gonna play with color to keep it really simple. And this is what we're targeting, okay? The settings in here are kind of what we're targeting, okay? And that's where I was talking about media queries or breakpoints. Breakpoints are the key words because the breakpoint defines the device itself. Like a tablet is always at 768. That's the width of a tablet. Whatever tablet, using a Samsung, using an iPad, 768 is what they write for tablets. So there's going to be a layout for 768. For desktops, for large desktops, for smaller phones. And so these breakpoints are the ones that we're aiming for. So we're going to go back here. Now I have colors, and I'm targeting the colors instead of me opting to put classes inside of the divs and target the divs, right? I decided to target the divs using what to give them background colors? What am I using? Nth of type, right? So remember I was talking about this. If these were spans, I could do nth of type 1, nth of type 2, nth of type 3. And so we're doing the same thing here. Instead of putting extra stuff in my HTML, I can just say grab the div, the nth of type, the first div, the second div, or the third div. Now, how could I change the first and last one? What could I change there? What's the other setting that I could change there? If I didn't want to do nth of type 1, first of type. Okay, that's another way to go. And then this would be last of type. Okay, I'm just showing you the other ways that we have. Last of type and first of type. Don't take a number because they're very explicit about what you're targeting. Nth of type, the first element is number 1, second is 2. Okay, so just know that there's different ways to do that. So take a moment to change that, because I want to really lock this in. Change first of type, change last of type, because once we do media queries, that's what I'm going to target from now on. So I don't want there to be a confusion, like you're doing nth of type and I'm typing first of type. So just take a moment and change that, okay? Small settings here, that's all. I also have flex working here too, display flex on the divs themselves, right? The divs have paragraph text, and I just put that because I wanted to center all the text nicely. So doing all of this, if I get rid of display, see what happens. That's what happens to the text. So by turning on display flex, doing flex direction column, which then stacks them again. I can do justify content center, which moves them over. Align item center, move them down, and then I nicely center text. This is what I do. I always use flex box. I almost never use line height anymore or text align center. I try to do it with flex box. It's just something that I prefer to work with now. Get better and better and better at flex box. Okay, so we are gonna add some media queries, right? Okay, all right, here we go. Let's add our media queries. So there is a difference between these two, a minimum width and a maximum width of something. So the first one here, I have this minimum width of 500 pixels, okay? Now, once again, nothing happens. So we wanna make something happen, right? So we are gonna target a minimum width here. So this is how we write a media query, okay? At media. The other time we saw at symbol was for what? Yeah, so the last time we saw an at symbol, it was at import, right? And we use that to import what? Fonts, right? So we use this to import fonts, right? That's really what we had used it to do. We imported fonts. Now we're using at media, right? And this is for a media query, okay? And so the media query requires that you tell it a few things. We're just gonna use the most basic type of media query right now, okay? And we're gonna say media, and in parens, min width 500 pixels. And then curly braces, opening and closing curly braces. So this in itself is kind of like a rule, right? Media query is a rule, curly braces, and now we have to say, what is it that we are going to target? What's our target? Well, which element am I targeting? First of type. So I type the element that I'm targeting, div. So on line 28, div, colon, first of type, because we made that change earlier, right? You didn't make the change, then it's nth of type 1. And it's a rule. Here, that's our structure. So when we do a media query, we always use the at media sign, right? At media. And then we give our query. And in here, we're telling it, hey, at a minimum width of 500 pixels, do this stuff, okay? At a minimum width. So let's say if I had a page, and then I had an element in this page, and say at 500 pixels, right? At a minimum width of 500 pixels, have these things take effect, but not before. Only when we hit a minimum size of 500 pixels will these settings actually take effect. So we're gonna change the color. I'm gonna slack out the color. Just have these colors that I was using. Pink. Okay, here's the background color. I'm using RGBA to play with the colors. And so I'm gonna put in here background, right? I'll just paste the background color. And look, the color changed. You can change it to whatever. You want to change it to another color. I'm using RGBA here. Anybody know what RGBA means? What is this doing for us? What's the A? Yeah, it's called alpha, but it's like opacity. That's really what it's doing, and I can change. It's the same color as this. This RGB 173's 216 is the same as the original color. I'm just giving it a lighter shade of color. So if I go down, the shade gets even lighter, and if I go up, the shade gets darker, gets closer to the actual color, right? So I'm going to keep it, what was that, 5? Yeah. So you see 564 pixels, right? 564, if we go, the minute I go to 500, anything less than 500, boop, we're right back to where we started. So this setting only takes effect when the minimum width is 500 pixels, okay? So when we do minimum width, this is minimum width, minimum is that way, okay? Because at some point in time, we're going to do max width. And when we get to max width is going to be something like this. If I do max width, then it takes up to effect up to the maximum width, but does not exceed it. Okay, one starts and one stops at the assigned widths. So that's what we did. Anything after it just changes. We can do anything we want. We could target, if we wanted, we could say, hey, font size, and what's the default font size right now? Does anyone know? You know. 16 pixels. 16 pixels is the default font size. And so if I was to say, like, I don't know, 20 pixels, and we break this font size, bloop, oh, didn't do it. That's interesting. That means I think we have to target the child elements. Let me see, I'm gonna just try this. Anytime it doesn't work. Oh, that's interesting. Did not do it. So maybe we gotta target the, oh, you know why? Here we go. Here we go. All right, which is more specific? I'm gonna go back. Div first of type or div P? Which is more specific, do you think? Let's go back. I'm gonna try to, can I show them both? So you tell me, which is more specific? If I was to write a rule that was like div P versus div first of type, are they both the same? Do they both weigh in the same? Well, we could change it. We could do this. One way to test this would be this. I took this rule and I copied it. I'm just going to comment it out, and I put it below this rule. Let's see. Did it? Nope, didn't change anything, right? So it's not the placement of the rules, right? So, oh, you know what? Let me turn off my notifications. Yeah. 2, 10 p.m. All right, here we go. I'm going to take you to the CSS specificity calculator. This little specificity calculator tells you between two rules what the weight of that rule is. So if I was to just do something like div first of type, that tells me the specificity of this rule. So the higher the bubble, the more weight it has. So IDs, you know, the reason why we give something ID is because it stands out. Like you have to go out of your way to override an ID, something a CSS property that's been assigned to an ID. It's easy to override an element's properties by giving it a class and targeting the class. It's easy to override a class by giving it an ID and targeting its ID. So now I'm going to go down here and compare two of them. I'm going to say div P. Which one is more specific? The higher we go, this is very specific, this is less specific. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? Or is it? I don't know if it's obvious. You see like 2 numbers here and you're like, well, this has 2 numbers here and this has a number 2. If there is a 1 here, this number could be 1,000. And it doesn't matter. This is more specific. Okay, it doesn't matter. The minute you go to the next circle, you start comparing the numbers at the next circle. You don't really care anymore unless there's like a 1 here and a 1 here, then this would have taken precedence. Okay, so I know now that that first of type is more specific than this. Okay, and it should have taken effect. Because it is more specific, it should have taken effect above the P. I'm just surprised that it did not take effect above the P. I find it odd that it did not. I'm gonna go back here, just gonna put that back. So let's see if I target, instead of doing that, let's target the same rule, div P. Let's see now if I can do font size. I know we said 20 pixels. Let's see if that changes it. There we go. All the font sizes of all the elements are that, but once again, we could target first of type P, and look, just that one. See how it goes back to the old font size at 500 pixels, it goes big, okay? You can target anything you want, any property you can target. Just know that if there is a rule outside of the media query that is more specific, you just can't override it. Okay, so if there's a conflict in specificities, because a lot of the times people go up here and they'll do those long strings of CSS that we've been doing since the beginning, like container, div, dot container, main, dot something, this excessively long, and then they'll come down here and then they're like, dot container. And then they're like, why doesn't it work? Because you created rules up here that was so specific that you need to be just as specific or even more specific. Otherwise, it won't work. So specificity is important here. Okay, so I'm just going to put here that specificity is important. Okay, and these rules, if they're going to change, need to be as specific, if not more specific, because the media query itself is also inducing some changes, right? So that's minimum width. Okay, so we got ourselves minimum width. I'm going to save this. Here's our minimum width. Boop, boop. Go back, same thing. Boop, boop. Easy enough, right? And I say here, with less than 500 pixels, the color will be blue. With 500 pixels and greater, color will be light blue. So now we know minimum width means it starts at that. Awesome. I want to create another rule for this one. So let's do at media. Here we're going to say max width 475 pixels. Okay. At a max width of 475 pixels, I want to do something. Well, what are we going to target? We're going to target the second element, right? We're going to target the div nth of type, so on line 38, nth of type 2, because that's the element, right? And we are going to give it this background color. I'm going to put, I just slacked out the color. I'm going to put the color there. Okay, I'm going to save it. Now remember, max of type starts and ends here. Okay? So whatever the default 0 pixel size is, that's where we're going to start, and we're going to test this out. When we do min, it starts and then ends whenever, right? This is where it ends. It'll keep going until you tell it to stop. Okay? This is going to be important in part of our mobile design because we're going to create these default settings for mobile and keep as many of those settings as possible and only change the ones we need when we hit certain breakpoints. Okay, so now if I squeeze this in and I see 475, see our color just changed here for this one because we're not at a minimum width of 500 pixels. So this just changed. If we go in, oh, you see, 475, is right there, and 474, boom, we're at a different color. Okay, once again, we can change the font size too. So here, I can take this and go here. It's doing the, oh, because it's first of type, so we want to target the nth of. And the font size is bigger, but only up to that point. See?
Does each rule get its own curly brackets?
Yes. So when we do the media query, you start with that. That's the default media query, right? The media keyword, the rule that you're aiming for, right? The dimensions that you're shooting for, and then the opening and closing, and then every individual rule gets its own rule, okay? So these are media queries, and the CSS is dynamically listening for these changes to take effect, okay? Okay. Cool. Not really, media queries aren't that hard to kind of wrap your head around. You just have to know how to write them. There's some other keywords that I left out right now. We'll get into that. I just want to kind of get into these. Now, media queries, once again, have the min, start at this, keep going, have a max, stop at this. But we can also do this. I want to target between sizes. So this was like a really big rule, like start at that and just keep going, don't ever stop. This one's like start at 0 and just keep going to 475 and then stop. But what if there's dimensions in between that I want to set just for that? Okay, I'm going to create another media query to do that. At media, and here we're going to say, and I have the rule here, max width 475 pixels and the min width at 500 pixels. I'm gonna get rid of this. Oh, I didn't close this. This one has to be closed. Okay, that's the rule. Okay, I slacked the rule out just in case any typos or anything. So we're combining media queries. Start at 0 pixels, go up to 475, right? And then min width at that. So let's take a look and see what happens. What are we going to do? So let me give you the color that we're going to change here. What we're going to be changing. Okay, that's the color. And what we are going to target is which element? Div last of type. Now I'm going to do background color. Did I do this wrong here? Oh yeah, I think I might have done this wrong. Hold on a second. We got to go to 485. Here we go. 485, what? Oh, you know what? I flipped these two. Here we go. I have to flip these. These are wrong. This is min, and this is max. Ah, there we go. So at a minimum width, 475, stop at a maximum width, right? Max is the stopping point, min is the beginning point. So between 475 and 500, right, break 500, goes to a dark pink again. Anything before that, 475, right? Pink, 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 right? Once again, we can play with the font size just to be more predominant, right? Instead of nth of type, I'm going to do last of type. And now, P, let's see why it's not overriding it. I have to go and edit my HTML. I'm just going to make this slight edit here. So that we know. Nice. That's what we're doing. The last of type 2. See, I don't see why the paragraph text is not changing. Changes with that one, changes with that one, but yet this one doesn't seem to change in size. So I have to take a look and see why that would not change. Oh, it's last of type. Oh, that's right. My brain was in nth of type. There we go. There you go. Good look out. Right? You can't do numbers with last of type or first of type that's only nth of type. So we see how media queries work, right? Really not that complicated. Media queries are fairly easy to implement. You need to like draw your design out. That's really where it boils down to. So when you were doing the whiteboard example, when you're building out your website, draw it out on a piece of paper and see what it would look like at mobile. What do you think? And then a tablet, what do you want to see? And one of the other important things is when you build for mobile, you build the content. So the most important content that you want somebody to see when you go to your site is here. There's no fluff. There's no like, oh, there's some white space. Let me just put something there and some colors and icons. It's they go to my site for what? The key things that they're going to my site for should be here and visibly displayed in a way that entices them to like look through it. Okay? So a lot of the times you build big and you just fill in gaps because you're like, I need more stuff, right? But what are you selling? What's your pitch? Okay? So these are our queries. Any questions on this? Once again, pretty straightforward. Of all the stuff, I would probably say media queries are very, very straightforward in how you use them, okay? There's obviously some nuances, and we'll go into some of those nuances. But 7:33, so why don't we take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back. I'll walk you through the lab.
Is it like peeing off the corner? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's hilarious. I felt like I was going to tip over. Yeah, I just swapped it.
issues getting the text like in their columns and like the app on the side, like
Okay.
when I slacked you.
Yeah.
So
Did any of the changes? I thought I had sent some changes. No?
it didn't really change when I
Okay.
implemented them. I'm gonna try it again to redo it.
Okay, because in this was yeah, I didn't move this onto the side. I think I just worked on this and that.
Oh, okay.
Right. So I think for this, let me get rid of this just to see. I don't know if at the time you had grid installed, but you were working with grid. I don't think I saw grid here. So here's the wrapper. Oh, you do have grid. All right. So you got grid, 3 of 5. All right. So you got 2 columns in row, header, and you're doing grid areas. Awesome. So I'm going to go to, hold on a second. I'm just going to go to full page view. Wrapper here, right? So the header, doing header. I'm just seeing where it is. What is the grid? It doesn't look like, I don't see grid being applied anywhere. It doesn't look like. You got grid, you got columns, you got rows. I don't see it actually being applied. So unless there's something else going on, because it just doesn't seem like it. Like you saw when I highlighted earlier, it would have put this on grid. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to go to Firefox.
Okay.
I'm just going to open up Firefox. Let's see how Firefox looks here. Sometimes Firefox is. So this is Firefox. Looks like you got wrapper here. All right, so there's a grid. So it's 1 to 2, and then you have that. All right, so I do see you have the header over here. So for some reason, it's putting the header here, and that looks like the issue. It's targeting this column as the header. So I don't know why it's targeting that as the header. Because you have the wrapper here, and this is grid.
Could be something with the issue.
So header, main, aside, footer. So I'm going to go to main, and you see grid area main. And then where's the footer? I don't see the footer. Is this bottom nav here? Do you have it set here? I mean, I don't see the footer at all down here.
Okay.
I do see the aside, right? So the aside would have been on the side here, but I don't see the aside being assigned anything.
How do you open that so you can see the line, like where the grid is?
Oh, I have the grid right here. So I see the second line. I just don't see, here's main, right? But I don't see the header. Here's wrapper. I don't see header being assigned to the header area. Looks like header is assigned. So maybe, I remember saying that I thought I saw like some broken ending div elements or something. So I don't know. What I would say is in something like this, I would go, I'm just going to open up yours again. I would take a look inside here and like analyze it. Maybe it'll say there's an issue, alt tab, but that's really nothing. The alt tab is nothing.
Yeah.
So at this point in time, I'd probably start removing things to figure out where, like I'd move the container. Like I might move, like, where does mean end? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think that's what I saw. I saw like mean, and I was like, well, where does it end? Because I got an article, closing article here.
I think main was in there in the initial HTML.
Well, it was, but I think it's missing something here because you got container B, but you don't, yeah, you don't have a, I don't know where things are opening and closing. So I'm going to tidy this up just to see, maybe that'll help. But if I close main, there's main, there's the aside. Yeah, you still have this. You didn't fix that thing. Once again, I don't know. I mean, that could be breaking everything. I just don't know. It didn't tell us that that was an issue. When I said analyze HTML, it did not have that. So what I would go is just start going through and maybe like commenting out huge sections and seeing if you can just target the header with grid. See if that works. Because that's what I would be doing now. Because I don't know what's broken, what's not. And then to go through all of this to be like, oh, is this it? I would just start deleting things.
Okay.
Commenting them out just to see if I can target the header in the grid. And if that works, that works.
Okay.
Cool.
Thanks.
All right, you got it. All right. So.
Never know. Also, you just one arm.
All right. So let's do this. Lap time. Lap time. Lap time. Lap time. All right. So, boop, boop. Responsive nav. Just when you think you are finished with the responsive nav or navs in general, you're not. All right. So, this is what we're going to do. I want to test this also. Before we do this, you're going to take this right here, and you're going to turn it into this at these breakpoints. Your first goal is to build this out because we are doing mobile first. So our design is going to implement this because we're going to expect 51% of our viewers to come. So we're going to build it so that most of the devices that come have this view. Right? Then if they go to tablet, boom, we'll start at 768. We'll kick that off. And 1024, we kick that off, right? Because a min width states what? Right? A min width starts and then keeps going. So here, because we're starting with mobile, that's our default, right? That becomes the default website. And then we're compensating for, hey, if people come at 768, that's where I want it to start. At the min width, I want it to start. And at the min width, I want it to start. 1024. These are the views. So you start with this, you build this out, and you build that out. Before we do that, what I want to do is this. I want to turn on CSS reset. Now we can do this. Now, there's some styling. You see this? This is what? What type of elements are these right now? You know what they are. Because they have dots, right? Okay. What default styling comes with these things? I see this a lot too. So if I go here and I go to the UL, all of this came with the UL. I didn't add it. That's just UL stuff. ULs always have padding left. They always have margin top and bottom. Sometimes as designers, developers, you don't want any additional fluff. You want like bare minimum elements that have no styling, and then you give every ounce of styling, so you're never surprised, right? You're never like, oh, I have to remove this, when you never wanted it in the first place, right? If you want padding, you give padding. You want margin, you give margin. So what we're going to do is in our CSS gear icon, did I not select this out? I did not, right? So select it out, right? So just select it out. So open it up. Fork it. So you have your copy of it. Your own copy. And when you open and you fork, go to this little gear icon up here in CSS. And in CSS, for our CSS base, we're saying neither. We want to keep the default CSS that came with HTML, but we have two options, reset and normalize. Watch what happens when we click on reset and we save and close. What happened? Yeah, everything was removed. All the default styling for these were removed. I added styling to keep the H1 the font size that it was, because if I didn't add it, it would have, see here, this window size? I gave it a font size of 30 pixels and margin bottom, because if I didn't, if I got rid of this, that's how everything looks. It looks like default paragraph text. So I went out of my way after I turned it on. I was like, oh, man, I got to turn that back on because I want it to look like this. What I want you to do is start with that. So you don't have anything. You don't have to get rid of padding. You don't have to get rid of margin. This is the way that things look by default, right? Anchor tags always have an underline. You don't remove it by resetting CSS. That's the default stuff with an anchor tag. So you're going to start with this, go to this, go to this, right? So I put in the CSS here. Default CSS for this site must be mobile. You don't create a media query for this. This is our normal default stuff, okay? These are images, by the way, so that's why I have like an image here, is to target here. That's like the divs up there. So you're not gonna really touch that stuff right there. You're gonna start adding your default on line 23. You add your CSS to target that. Then you're gonna add media queries at a minimum width of 768, at a minimum width of 1024. You target the things that make them look like that. Flexbox, right? Because it's an nav. Don't use grid, use Flexbox for this, all right? This is a Flexbox thing, not a grid thing, because we're targeting content now. Grid is for layout, Flexbox is for content. And navs are always going to be content. The nav box itself could be placed in grid, but the elements inside are always targeted with Flexbox, okay? You're gonna add it right here. This is where you would add your first media query. I would do like, oh, at, media, min width 768 pixels, boom. And then I target whatever elements I need to target to make them look like this. Easy enough? Once again, all the stuff you learned, and then just a little bit. It's really what it is. Just a tiny little bit. And you have media queries here, so every time you move this, look, you got your media queries. And I did suggest that you do this. See where I have change view? If I go to change view and I right click on full page view and I open it up in a new tab, I can then go to developer tools and use that little icon that I was talking about earlier. And we can start playing with this now. Just makes it easier. Save it in the other side, then go over here and take a look at it. And then just start changing it. Go to mobile, and you should see the way it looks on mobile. Go to 768, go to 1024, and you should see the nav change before your eyes. All right. You're gonna do that. I'm gonna say it's about 30 minutes. If we need more time, we do. Now I'm gonna put a poll for you to let me know when you've got mobile done, got tablet, and when you've got desktop, okay? So I'm gonna say poll completed the following mobile tablet okay. So I just put that poll in there so that when you're done with mobile, just click on mobile so I know I can get a kind of a head count. You can always increase the time. And you're off to the races. which whatever elements you need to change. So obviously you have to target the individual elements to remove the left. You have to reposition the elements so they're like this. You have to change the width. Right. That. So what I would do is highlight the element. The shift tool is a correct. So inspect the elements. Inspect that. Go to the click on that. Go to the LI. So the LI is so small. How is the white line full width? So let's take a look. What do you have to find on the let's box out. Okay, I mean, you have fronts and header. I mean, the UL should not be like this. You did go back to the because you want to list down. The LIs just like on top. I'm just trying to determine how you got. Okay, okay. So you did. So you're trying to do so what you're doing is you're turning off flex for the logo. You turn off flex for two things. The H1, this logo that's painted flex. It's the nav that contains all these elements, right? So you want to be wherever you turn on. You get it on the LIs too, you know. So now you do just as high confidence in it. Oh, because it's there. Unless the logo shows something defined somewhere else. So I like the yeah. I don't know what's this is just text decoration. I don't know if that's it. But what I would do is if you have this closing, this closing. Oh, that's a media query. Oh, so you're also media queries. So all of the CSS for this shouldn't be inside media. It's the default CSS. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. The media queries are meant to adjust with the camera and the default CSS should be this. Just the default. I'll be right there. Okay. So you can go to the reset CSS right here. Just go reset. Do the reset. I'll save and close it. Okay, so display flags on the logo makes it go always. Right.
we have display flex, we have columns, so they're saying, right? And you want to create some space between the logo and that. Okay, I get you. So you would need to put space around this thing. So say you just want to start with you probably want to get like a margin around the logo, padding around the logo, to get it so that the logo. Yeah, so now you got some space. I mean, it doesn't have to be more. Also, flexible use FLX. Yeah, that's all great. Flex is the turn flex on, turn flex off, or if you target the elements, you do it as flex 1, flex 2, with the widths and dimensions. Because you have like flex everywhere. It's like, yeah, let's turn it flex on the height or something. It's like, what you want is the bigger boulder elements to be like flex. You want things. So this is all in some sort of fit, right? There is the logo, and it has the nav, right? This div I would probably do flex, display flex, right? I would probably do display flex here as well. And then do flex direction. I mean, they're already at the color. And then maybe give them nav some sort of height. You give them nav a height, then you could on the LIs themselves, like these. I give the nav a height. Right? And these LIs here, I can do something like flex 1. And then they all take up the free space. You know what I'm saying? Like the UL itself needs to have space for the LIs to like space themselves out. I'm gonna do that. I'm just gonna. And let's, so what you want to do is like change the width of that also, right? You want this to be here. Exactly. You don't want to do wide. So you're going to change the width just to like force this div, right? So the header, you can get that to a base front. You can target just the header. And don't do it in 760 because this should have been the default. Yeah. What I'm noticing is this, is that for this design, don't put anything inside of this media query till you're ready to hit this. All of your default CSS should be for this. So your default CSS should go in here. So I don't know, I have a div, right? So I'm just gonna go take a look at this design. So I have the header, I have a nav, and I have this UL. So it looks like the nav should probably have, I don't know, the way these things are kind of loaded up anyway, I almost feel like there's a lot of default there going on too, right? So if I gave the, I'm just gonna go back right. If I gave the header right now, if I was just like header, and I was like width, I don't know, what are we talking? Maybe 200 pixels? I don't really know. I'm going to assume it's 200 pixels, but I'm also going to do this. And I've mentioned this before, to border 1 pixel, just to see what the thing is.
There we go. I got a border now. So now I know the dimensions. Maybe it's a little bigger. I don't really care. I'll make it smaller. This doesn't have to be perfect. So maybe it could be, I don't know, maybe like 150 pixels. There we go, right? 150 pixels. If we wanted to center things too, for the nav, once again, I kind of mentioned earlier that I like doing with centering, you know, display flex. We could have done that. We could do flex direction column, and then we're right back there. Then I could do, I think, is it going to be a line item since I just changed this align item center? Boom, right? I don't know why the div logo didn't go anywhere. It didn't center. So if it didn't center, I go here and I take a look and see why. Oh, here we go. Because the whole thing is taking up the width. So I'm not centering that. I'm centering these. So this div already is taking up the full width. So I might have to do text align center or something here. Once again, I'm just trying to figure out what's the best route. So maybe the nav, I'll just try text align center. Let's see. Does it work? There we go. So everything's centered with just a handful of lines. And now obviously we want this to be a little taller, right? So we could give some height to the nav, right? Or the header. The header could have some height to it and maybe pull these things down. So maybe the height on the header could be, here's the nav, right? Oh, am I moving? I'm going to move this down here because I got the nav up there. So I'm going to put it right here. So maybe for the header, we give it a height of, I don't know, 200 pixels. Once again, just to give it, we're emulating, right? That's all we're trying to do. And now we have height to that, but this element itself, here's the logo, here's the header, here's the nav. The nav itself is pretty small, not really taking up all the full width. So I put display flex on the nav. So maybe for the nav, I could do height 100%. Would that give it to me? Let me see. All right, so the nav is now at 100%. Awesome. So here's my div, here's my UL. Maybe the UL I'll target as 100%. UL, height, I don't know, 100%. There we go. Now the UL has LI items, and we could maybe do display flex there, and do flex direction column. And now there's the UL, and there's a lot of space in between these things. So if I go to the LIs now, and I do flex 1, and move them down, right? So you're going to find different ways to do it. Like I could tweak this, go back and go like, oh, I don't need that text align anymore. Maybe I could do it a different way. Maybe it was justify content center. Maybe that was it. Justify content. I don't think that's going to be it, but let's say use that. No, it doesn't center my logo. So I feel like I need text align center to get all that done. Okay. And let me see. I want to get my stuff back. I just lost all my stuff here. And my nav. Let me go back. Where's my nav? Oh no. Hold on. Keep losing all my stuff. Why do I keep losing it? There we go. Let me get it all back. There we go. I'm going to get all my stuff back. Yeah. And then it's just a matter of like, hey, giving some distance between maybe the logo, right? So the logo is this div class logo. I have my nav. Maybe I could do logo and do, I don't know, margin bottom 20 pixels, push it down, or margin top and bottom. Maybe I just want to do top and bottom. Right? I could have done padding on the top and get margin bottom. These are just different ways to do it, right? You did use Flex for your fashion blog, right? You heavily used it. And now just to apply that to this small thing is a struggle at this point in time. So I'm just going to just finish this and then I'll go back around. See, I have this here, and the UL doesn't have width, right? So it's got a height. So if I gave it a width of 100%, and UL now has a width, and my LIs should, I gave them border, bottom, 1 pixel solid white. Well, we won't see anything, right? Because everything is white. So I have to change the color. So I'm going to figure out what this color is. So I'm just going to use my color picker. Go here, get the color picker, and I mean, you could choose any color. Doesn't really matter, right? I'm going to go to my header. I'm going to have something like it, right? Maybe I'll put some padding around the LIs, something like that. What's that? Go get these things separated. So I went to the LIs and I gave them flex 1. So because this thing has a height, giving them flex 1 means they take the free space and they divide it amongst themselves. So if I get rid of that, we're there. I go there, we're back. And then it would just be a matter of like separating myself from these other things. So I don't want to be all up in this LI's business. So maybe we'll do like margin top or something to get rid of it. All right. Or I wonder if I could just do display flex on these things and do a line items center, justify, content center, point, something like that. Now I just saved the starter code. So the code that I slacked out, this is the starter code that I just put together. And it kind of meets the design, right? I just have to get rid of the underscore, the underline for the anchor tag and everything. But in all honesty, without changing the font sizes and things, this is it. But I think what's important just to point out with working with these designs, think you're going to be working on your project, right? If you're struggling with something this small, trying to get the design, keep that in mind when you work on your project. Don't think about taking on something too large, because if you struggle with just a small thing like this, you're going to struggle with larger designs, okay? And this is, 20 lines of code to kind of get this where you need to get it to target. Okay. Awesome. Got it.
I don't know if I'm over. I changed my name to black.
Sure, yeah.
Oh, it's easy to use the faster. But I added on
Okay. Yeah, because you use it to like select.
But I did. I
So I would do something like, I would do something. So, right? We have built like this exact map, right? So that's the logo here.
Starting me off like 4 minutes.
I'm just gonna say UL, right? So I gave you UL certain, right? And then for this right here, it's something like justify content space 2 between, right? This was an nav item, and this was an nav item. The space between would push them to opposite ends, and that means I can't do complex 1 here. I can't do because they'll take up the free space. So I do justify content space between them.
So then I don't need to.
I don't think you need to flex in because if you use space between, it's going to push it all the way to the end anyway.
But I need to shrink.
You need to shrink the UL, right? Because this whole thing is the nav, so you want the nav to be the full side of the head, right?
Yeah. Like I can
Yeah, you can do a percent. Did you refresh it? Oh, yeah. All right, so you get them over there, so now you just have to figure out how to get that thing over there. Yeah, so I don't know if you did justify content space, or maybe that element was too big. Yeah, I'd have to take a look to see. Is it? Yeah. Okay. All right. So what exactly are you trying to do? To center? Oh, I got you. Okay. Oh, so you got the other design. You got the right. All right. Yeah, I got it. Sure. Oh, yeah, that's cool. All right. So then, for you to get them on the road, the nav contains the logo, right? So the nav contains the logo and the UL. Right, you want them, well, you want them on 2 separate lines. You want these to be on the same line, correct? So the UL, do you have, on the UL, do you have display flex? Okay. What I'm thinking is, how are they, because if you want them, yeah, if you did display flex on the nav, on the UL, it should have made them go left to right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I don't see why I thought it's targeting the line. Yeah, they're going to do whatever the LI does. So if you always, can you send it? Yeah, it's kind of. That's right. All right. All right, yeah. So I'm going to take a look at yours, right? First place I'm going is DevTools. I take a look. Here's your UL. You got on the nav. You got Display Flex at 768. All right. So in here, I'm still surprised the elements would not sit next to each other. X direction, margin, right? That's bad property, right? I want to do that. So did you like give these things anything? Nope. Nope. I don't know why, so I'm going to try doing flex direction row. So what these must have been set at some point in time is to be flex direction column, or they're absorbing column from somewhere, because look, I did row. That's column, that's row. So all I did was change it from direction row to column, and they are now doing it. And if we target each one of these LIs and we say flex 1, then they're exactly kind of what you're looking for, right? If you're not in developer tools doing it, like trying to do it solely in CSS, you're going to struggle. Try to be in developer tools. Like I stressed it plenty of times. Just go into developer tools and force the things in here. See what settings are being applied directly to that element, because you might have CSS sprinkled throughout targeting this one element in your default CSS, in your media queries, and it's a combination of all those things. This tells me what's applied to this thing and where it's being applied. Right? And then if you know like what flex direction row versus column does, you can, I don't know why it's not, but here you go. I added flex direction row because you have flex direction column on your native CSS for mobile. Right? So you have it on your native UL to meet your UL design for your mobile, but now we're on tablet, you have to go from column to row. These subtle changes need to be made, and so I need to force this to change. Now the rules themselves are the same, except this is a media query, so that adds to the specificity, so I can override that particular rule. Okay? Hi. Sure. Did you figure out pushing the logo over? How did you do it? I'm just saying, Emma's having the same problem.
Oh, my face is real good.
You can go to the UL? Awesome.
Okay. And then I push space.
And you do the space between. So what I would do is exactly what I just did.
Yeah.
Go into developer tools and work it like I just said it 2 minutes ago, and everyone's still like, let me go into my CSS, developer tools. All right, stay there. Always stay there. Stay in developer tools. We'll figure it all out. All right, let me see what we got here. All right, I updated what I had pushed out with the solution that I had come with previous. I was just kind of doing it on the fly earlier. So if you're struggling with at least the first one, the solution is posted. So you can at least copy and paste it, compare it to what you have. So at least you have that starting point, right? There's padding involved. There is, oh. For this one, I actually don't think I used flex at all for this one. was doing flex, but it doesn't look like flex was used. Oh, sweet. So I got 2 finished. So between, I mean, you finished, right? You pushed it over, the header, the logo?
Do you mean just people?
Yeah, did you build all 3 of them?
Oh, no, there's no.
Oh, okay.
Just asking for help.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, well, I thought you only were pushing over the logo. That was it. Yeah, okay. I feel like everyone's struggling with this. It looks like we got 8 mobiles. So at least 8 people got worked out the mobile. 1 for tablet and 1 for desktop. So whoever got the whole thing, 2 for desktop. So whoever did the whole thing, mobile, tablet, and desktop, shoot me your code. And there's different ways to solve the problem. Let's just take a look. Because we're past the 30 minutes that I had signed for the lab, so I kind of want to maybe just go over the solution. And we can take a look at. Sometimes just sitting there struggling is just going to be frustrating. So let's go over this. I'll go over the solution, and then we'll do another media query thing that I think is going to be maybe just a little easier than this. So let's take a look. So we have the default styles, right? So these are all the default styles all the way to line 46. So let's just take a look. So we have the nav. We're doing display flex on the nav. And we all know the design by now, right? We have the nav that contains all the elements. So it's really the nav is the thing, right? If the nav takes up the full width of the header, then it's the nav that we're going to kind of mess with here. So display flex on the nav, and then flex direction column. Why column? Yeah, because the default is row, and if you remove that, they would have sat next to each other like that. That's the native. So sometimes you want to do that. And when you do this, you're doing it because you want to do things like align items, kind of like move them over. We all did the text align center because the logo itself wasn't moving over. Like the element was just a full width, right? Background blue, cool. Text transform for the nav, for the div, for the logo, right? So this is the logo. I probably would have just maybe done dot logo just to kind of target the thing, to be a little bit more specific, so that I'm looking at it, there could be multiple divs somewhere. I don't know. Text transform uppercase because we want it to be uppercase. Cool, right? Flex 1, so that it does what? Why is it flex 1? Like, I would turn it off just to see. What does it do? Doesn't really do anything at this point in time. So we don't need flex 1 here, so we can get rid of it. This is part of the design process, right? Sometimes I have stuff up there and I'm like, why do I have that? I needed it when I was originally coming up with the design, but then I didn't. Then we have just some padding around it. So if we comment that out, padding moves it. All right, so we like the padding because the padding is creating space. And if I go here, I just wanted to take a look at the element itself, right? So that's the padding. So I can see that the element is creating space. Now, a lot of the times though, when I want to have an element push away from other elements, which is what's happening here, what should we use instead of padding? Margin, right? To push away from elements, you use margin, and padding is like to pad the inside of something. Once again, the design works. I'm just pointing out some things that we could use to improve the overall design. But once padding works, that's fine. The UL has a width of 100%. Let's see, do we need that? Yes, we do. Because the UL now is just here, right? Because it's a flex item, the UL doesn't have the full width of the page, right? The UL is a flex item. The nav is, the div, this is a flex item, right? Because we turned, did we turn? Yeah, we turned flex on that. So this, what happened here? Oh, I went outside of it. Let me go back here. If I go too high up.
Sorry, I can't search the web.
Oh, I don't know what that was about. So I'm going to get rid of this. And then the elements whoosh, go the straight line. Because a lot of you were stuck there, right? And you're like, why is it just here? I want it to take the full width. Well, examine the element, right? So if I got rid of that and I was like, all right, let me take a look and see what's causing this thing. Not like, why doesn't the UL take up the full width right here, right? It's not that. This thing is taking up the full width, right? And it doesn't have any width. It just has padding. I don't know why, so I'm just going to give it a width. 100% takes up the full width. Right, then we move into the UL. We move into the LI. Here we're just using padding, once again, to give it some space, right, inside of it. Here I probably would have used maybe padding inside of the element or padding on the anchor so that the anchor becomes the whole clickable thing, right? That's what we had done in a previous design so that when I hover over it, this whole thing would have hovered and been activated versus trying to get really close to the thing. But once again, that works. With border bottom, gives us the white border. We hit the anchor, text decoration none, gets rid of the blue line. We color it black. That's our standard, right? Awesome. So then we hit the media queries. Now I'm gonna go to 768, right? If I go all the way out here, 768, just a little bit, boom. We have that design. So let's take a look at what that is. So the UL now has changed to be display flex, which it wasn't before because LI items stack on top of each other, right? No reason to turn on display flex there. They're already stacked. You just need to center them and get an underline, and that was it. But now we want those LI items to sit next to each other. That has got flex written all over it, right? We don't have to target this. This thing is doing what it did before. It took up the full width. It's got its padding. It's fine. The LI, flex, right? The UL is flex to make them sit across. I'm just curious, does the LI need to have flex? Oh, it does. Oh, that's right. Why are we doing flex 1 here? Anyone have ideas? Because you came with the solution. Anyone? Why flex 1? Now watch. I remove flex 1, they all go to the left. What is flex 1 doing? Flex 1 is almost like the 1FRs, right? It'll divide the space up. So there's all this free space right here. All of the free space is right here because when you do display flex, these elements sit right next to each other. They act like inline elements. So there's all this free space. If I want to divide that free space evenly amongst all of the elements, you turn them on to flex 1. Okay? If you wanted to target the first element and give it twice the size, I could say li, I don't know, first of type. I'm just, once again, just showing you. And I said flex 2. It takes up twice the free space. Okay? So this is kind of like the 1FR and the 2FRs. This is the flex version of it. Okay, so if I target one specifically, I give it flex 2, it'll take up twice the free space. We don't need to do this. I was just kind of showing you, once again, what flex does. And that's it.
Like this is all you needed to do for the tablet design. Two elements, one setting a piece, and you're able to achieve that design. Now, if we grow larger, right? This is going to be 1024. So I'm going to just change the setting here. So instead of 1024, maybe I'll make it 800 just so I don't have to resize. All right? Once again, you can play with the size. So here, now we have to go from that to that. Okay, so let's take a look. Nav, I'm going to put this on the other line. Flex direction row. Okay, why are we doing flex direction row now? If you set row is the default. If you set row, that must mean it was column before, right? So once again, you just play around. If I get rid of this, there you go. So we're doing flex direction row. So they're all on one row. Justify content space between. Watch what happens if I remove that. Nothing. Okay, so maybe we don't need that. All right, awesome. I would take a look just to see, like, this thing looks like it's flex 2 then maybe? Maybe that's how you got it? Oh, I see. Okay. Let me go to the logo, text align left. I'm just curious. Huh. Oh, now if you do space between. It should have, though. And if we go bigger, but unless this thing has a certain width, I just feel like it should. Right? Because the nav is still flex direction row, space between. I'm just surprised that that's taking up the full width. Unless it's flex 1.
It's just 2 items. Yeah, but it's just, for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Always since the beginning, remember it took up the entire.
Yeah, that's true. I have to take a look and see why. So I'm just going to add text align left, give it no padding top and bottom. So I want to get rid of that space. The UL now has a width of 50%. We get rid of that. It's just a little wider. Not a big deal. We'll keep that. And then the LI, we get rid of those borders. We don't need those borders anymore, right? Otherwise, they'll have, you don't see it, but you see that if they still have their border, that white line is the border of the LIs. So we have to remove it because it's overriding the blue. It's sitting on top of the blue. So we just kind of get rid of that. And then we have this design right here, right? Boom, boom. You don't see it here, but it's probably happening here too, the border. If we removed it there, but you don't see it because it's a white line, so you don't see it. And then that's it, right? I'm gonna say it's not, this wasn't mind-bending design to implement, but it, oh, was it? It definitely had its challenges, right? You work through flex, just wasn't any grid. We're just kind of going back to flex and normal things like pannings and widths. The one thing that I couldn't stress most, though, is being in developer tools. If you weren't in developer tools investigating these things, then that's the first thing that's holding you back. The very first thing. You got to be in developer tools as you're investigating these things, okay? I'm going to fork this. I'll save that as the solution, okay? Again, I had a different solution also. I think this is a solution I think I had for last class, which is just going to be different. Display flex, justify content center, 3 properties here. I had a few additional properties. There's different ways to achieve this. So I'm going to post both solutions so you can see how 2 people approach it. And if I investigate it, I could probably have 3 and 4 solutions from the class too. I can't tell you what's the right or wrong way to do it. Did you meet the design? Yes, that's the right way, I suppose, right? Awesome. So let's do this. Why don't we take another 5-minute
Great. Let's take a quick 5-minute break, come back, and then I'll go through one more thing with media queries. I think. What's up there? What's that? You hate it. It's a strong words. If you can figure out how to master the basic layouts, then you start putting the content in there and you can work your way to the content. Yeah. I would rebuild everything you've done in class until you can build it without looking at the solution. You know, even when I build something out from scratch or on the fly, I have a solution. I can do it, but then my mind might be like, oh, this time I'm going to use Flex for everything. And all of a sudden I look at my solution. I'm like, oh, that's different than this new solution, right? I know what to change when I need to change it, but I made so many different changes in other little things, like it's going to be different. So implementing the same solution over and over again will depend on your mindset at that time. But I would try and then maybe do it a few different ways just to like, no, like keep working with it, right? So, media queries. Oh, let me see, is this it? All right. So I've implemented media queries for this. So I'm going to go to the design. And here's our standard 2-column layout. This is with Flex. This is the Flex one. If I go to 1024, still the way we want it, that's desktop view. If I go to 768, what happens? The layout changes, right? So that aside just went underneath this thing, right? So knowing Flexbox, and we know that this container is probably a Flexbox container, knowing that, how would I have made this happen? How would I get these two elements to sit next to each other using Flex? And then how would I get them to sit on top of each other using Flex? Flex direction, right? So here, this is just Flex. They sit next to each other. This becomes Flex 3 or 2. This is Flex 1. They take up the free space. This is margin right, and I got margin. That's an easy design. You did this already, right? And then if we change this, this becomes Flex direction column. I have to change it. And then once again, this will be Flex 2, Flex 1, and that design, relatively easy done, right? If we go to mobile view, how do I get rid of the thing? That's like the easiest one. I feel like that's the easiest question. Display none, right? I target that element, display none, the thing's gone. I don't have to touch anybody else. That's all we need to do for this particular design, right? Seems pretty fairly intuitive, right? We don't have to do anything there. We have to do something there, and we have to do something there. So let's do this. Select this out. Fork it. Let's see if we can add some media queries to this to do just that. Actually, we have to go all the way to the bottom to do media queries. Oh, bless you. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to see if we can add the media queries at the top instead of going all the way to the bottom, because it seems tedious to go all the way to the bottom. So what's the first media query? Now, when we built this, we weren't building this for mobile in mind, right? So desktop was our original view. I got to backtrack now. And when I backtrack, what do we do? Mobile wasn't my view, and now I need to backtrack. What are we going to do here? Are we going to do min when it starts here, do it? Are we going to do max? Which is the one that we're going to use here? Min or max? Okay, I got one for max. Let's take a look. I'm going to take a look at this design, and I'm going to go here and let's kind of take a look at it and see. So here's this section. I have max width. Yeah, max width at 768. So up to 768, this design should take effect. Okay? Up to 768, that's max, right? Max is where it ends, everything before it to where it ends. So when I say max width 768, up to 768, this should be the design, which then goes to assume that if we went one step further, I would have max width, or still have 768. Maybe it's smaller than that. I don't know how to get the thing to disappear. Yeah, I don't see where it disappeared. The article is not there. Oh, it's display none. Oh, I have another media for you. 425 display none. It's gone, right? I didn't really have to touch anything else. I didn't have to touch any other elements, just the one that I want to target. So let's try to do that. Here, I'm going to say at media, right? Max width 768 pixels. And let's target the thing. right? So here, you know, I'm at 735 right now. So if we do anything here, we should target this thing, right? So what are we going to target? What did we suggest that we hit here? I'm going to go to our design so we can see what we have here. We have a main with a section and an aside. A main that has a section and an aside, right? If I go take a look at my layout 1, I see main is given a flex of 3. The section has a flex of 2, so we're display flex also. So here, so section has a flex of 2. So what would we need to change here? And once again, we can even test it out here, just for the sake of it. Watch, I could do a flex direction, just to test it. Column, look, right? They stacked up on top of each other. So now I know the thing. I'm not going to do it here because that's not where I want this to happen. I want this to happen in our media query, right? So I'm going to do this though because I want to target the element very specifically. So see this whole path. It's very specific. div.layout1, div.container_main. You need that whole path here. And if we do flex direction column, it moves it, right? We have to do some other stuff, and something else needs to be changed here too, though, right? I'm going to save it. How would I decide what needs to get done now? Where would I go? Developer tools, right? Developer tools to figure out what's causing this anomaly. I don't know why there's no space between these two. I don't know why this is pushed over a little bit. Why is this here? Why is this not fully flush, right? So I would have to go. Let me get out of here. Let's move it over a little bit. And let's go. Let's take a look right here. So if I highlight it, what's pushing it over? Yeah, so I got to get rid of margin. So this wasn't the thing that had margin right. It was this that had margin left, right? So now I have to target this element to get rid of the margin left, right? So once again, I have main here, right? I'm just going to do main. I'm going to copy this, create another rule here for main aside. Let's see if this works. And say margin left 0. We get rid of margin left. And then what's this over here? Where'd that come from? I don't know, Joe. So investigate it. Yes, that's exactly what we do. I got margin right there. So whatever this design was, the person put margin right on this and margin left on the other, which, I don't know, worked for the design, but now it's kind of causing us some problems. So I would say, all right, so I have this. I'm going to put it just above it because I feel like the positioning of things should have it above it, and do margin right 0. Okay. Now what do we need to do? Margin where? Where do we move? Where should we move all that margin? Bottom, right? So either a side, top. Now I always like to have the thing push away and push down. I almost never have margin up trying to push away unless it's the top element. I try to have the thing push down. So I would say margin right, margin bottom, bottom 10 pixels. And we have our design, right? Couple of small changes and we have that design. So this should, if we go back to here, that's exactly what it was before. We go here, boop, here we go. And then at 425, what was our goal? What's our goal? Yeah, we want to get rid of it. So I'm going to save this. Add a rule for 425 and get rid of that thing. It's your job. We just did this. So if you fork what I just slacked out earlier, I just saved it so you have it. You're going to create a rule on line 20 for, let's say, 425, a max width of 425. Target the aside and get rid of it. All right. I just put a poll out, so when the aside goes bye-bye, just click on. Yes, okay. That's good. I'll add my rule. Add media. Width 425 pixels. And I have to target the aside. Here it is. Undo. Display. Oh. And the only other design is this, right? There's too much space here. There's now too much space there because the main contains it. And I put margin bottom on the section, and this is margin bottom. The margin bottom is on the section. The section's in main, so it kind of distances itself within main. But the footer has margin top. So here I would target the section, just get rid of. Get rid of that. Rid of it. All right, I'm going to put it above it because that's how I visually see them stacked on top of each other, and do margin bottom 0. There we go. I go out. We got that. I go out. We got that. Okay. So I just kind of want to stress, as you start working on your project, and that's the deliverable next week is going to be like the idea of your project, if you can draw it out, is I'd like you to consider just areas of content. What are the areas of content? If it's your portfolio, that's cool. You know you're going to have a nav. I don't need to know what all the links are in the nav. You're going to put your portfolio projects here, maybe an about me, whatever, and then you're going to have a footer. How is it going to look? Is it going to look like that? Are the big elements going to be that? Then draw that as mobile. And when it goes to desktop, what is it going to look like? Are you going to have something else? Is there going to be another section? Like, could the about me just disappear? And all you see are your portfolio projects, right? Your projects are more important than like, hey, I'm a web developer and here's a picture of me. That's not as important as your projects, right? That's what I want people to focus in on. If they are on a tablet, great, then they can read it. If they're on a desktop, awesome, they can see my picture. But my picture is not as important as what I can do, okay? Was that easier than doing the other thing? All right. Maybe we should have started with that. All right. So what's funny is we were going to do something like this, which is I would have lost everybody. This would just been a code along. So I had built this out. I improved this since the last time I taught the class. I added the menu over here. So this is the Food Sense website. So if we go to Food Sense, this is their website. I love their website. I want to rebuild their website. So what did I do? I rebuilt their website and I made it mobile. So if I go here and I go to developer tools and I go to mobile and I go out here, this is how it looks at large screen. If I go to 1024, once again, you can put this on your portfolio as a project you did in class if you know how to do it. If you dissect it, you build it, work through it, right? What changed between these two? Take a look. What changed between them? By look, I mean look over here. What changed? What's missing? What did I take out? Yeah, so I took out the paragraph text here. It's gone. And that's exactly what they do on their site. They remove the paragraph text. What happens when we go one step further? What happened? The side nav is gone. Right? And if I go one step further, I remove the things over here. And that's exactly on their site. If I went to their site, I did the same things. You would see some other things happening. I couldn't implement all these changes, but here it is, right? Everything's there. Go here. Text is missing. If I go one more in, the nav moves up over here. That would have taken us like 3 hours to get all this done and everyone following along. If we go one more step closer, the nav readjusts itself. We go one step closer, and then it's just getting rid of some of that free space over here, right? Okay, so we wouldn't have had time to do this. I would love to do this in class, but it would just, once again, take too long. So we got 9/11. All right. What about this one? Let's take a look at this one. I think we have a few minutes to work through maybe that. All right, let's go here. Here's our layout. If I go to 768, what happens? Bloink to that, right? So consider this, because this may be something like, how did you get, I mean, according to the position of these things, if this is Flexbox, that means that this thing is stacked here, this is stacked here, and that's stacked here, and then I do Flexbox, they all sit next to each other, right? How would I get them to stack like that? How do you get this thing and that thing to sit over here now? What's that? You could do align self. There's another Flexbox property called order. I can actually change the order of these things. Okay. Let's see if we can try to implement this one, which once again, isn't that hard. I'm gonna go here. Here's our aside. This is what we targeted for those two. So now inside of the same media query, because here's my layout one, I gotta do the same thing, right? So this is going to be, I'm gonna take a look at my design, and I see here, I have a main, and pretty much it's the main that I'm targeting, right? Two asides and a section. All right, so I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna target the same thing, except this time I'm gonna change it to be layout 2, okay? So I'm just gonna push that down instead of doing, I'll call this layout 2. All right. What's the first thing we need to do here? Yeah, so same thing, right? Flex, direction, column, all right? And there we go. Now here's the issue though, right? These two are where they should be positioned. So let's just say we wanted to keep it that way without doing the flex order, because flex order would allow me to move these things around. It's not a property we've covered, but once again, there's a lot of flex properties I can't cover in class. We just can't go every property, but there is this flex. If I click on this element, here's the aside, and here's the section, right? Here's the aside. So if I go to this aside, I can do order, and I think if I do 2, do you see it just moved? All I did was change the order of this, and I moved it. It's now moved down. If I really want to position them all as 1, 2, and 3, I would have to give this a 1, this a 2, and this a 3 to play the game. But all it took was one single property to move this thing to another spot, was flex order, right? So let's target that. Let me go back in here. I'm going to turn this off. What happened to my, here it is, right? What are we targeting? The aside. So I'm going to take a look here. Mean aside. How do I target the first aside? Exactly. Mean aside first of type. Flex 2. Oh no, order. 2. Now it's just a matter of what? I'm going to save this. Can you fix the rest of this? Can you create the space? Can you get rid of the margins? Can you do all of that for the 768? All I need you to do is make it look nice. Get rid of the space on either side of the section. Create some space between these things. Add the appropriate margins to fix that. Okay, I saved it, so that's all you have to do. What's the width here? Let's see. What's the median width? Let's see the very top. The top. Yeah, so it should be. Oh, use the colon. Max with colon. Colon is what it takes, man. Do you have a question?
Yeah. So all the way to the bottom.
Yeah, we would have to like order all of these things to be like 1, 2, and 3 to really order them. When you start just picking one in ordering, so you're saying that the left aside is in the bottom. Yeah. I think when we do the order, when we do that, yeah, it goes all the way to the bottom. If we did 1, I'm just curious. If I did 1 now, nothing really changes. It's the same thing. If I did 0, I think it goes to the top, and then 1 just pushes it. If we don't, yeah, if we don't order these also, we can't move them in all of the positions like we would think. Like this is the order, so they're at both of these are at 0. So. All right. All right. I just put a poll out there to click on if layout 2 is complete. Yeah, so the other layout would be, I think one of them disappears, just one. So if you can make one disappear, that'd be great. Yep, just any which side you want to make disappear. Doesn't. At this point in time, it's just like design. Whichever one you want to make disappear, you could. I just wanted everyone to like hit this as the baseline for the 768. For the desktop, can you hit that? You can hit that, move on to get rid of one of the asides. Oh, that's right. See? You see me thinking. I was like, why is that not working? That should be working. Here you go. Layout 2. Okay. That's what I have for the 768. Here what you had. You compare it. I saved it so you can refresh on your screen and you'll see all my changes. Good. You did answer the poll. You did. My challenge was going to be like, all right, here's this design. Work on that. That one's a bit more complicated. I am. Send it out. This isn't response, right? Is this the response one? Yes, it is. All right. Let's see. Okay. I was going to stop here for today. I don't have much more time. Show the 425, right? 768, 425 for layout 2. One thing. I just targeted one of the asides, gave it a display none, the thing's gone, right? Just want one of them gone. Display none, 425, and it's gone. We go out. And so the things as far as it pertains to media queries, because we did a lot of the Flexbox and that was just like Flexbox, it's a lot of stuff, right? The things I really want to like emphasize here are these two and when you would use them, okay? If you start your design at mobile, your default CSS doesn't include any of this. So that's mobile. If you're gonna grow out at that point in time, which one do we use? If I started with mobile, which one of these do I use? Min width, right? At a minimum width begin, right? Because minimum width says start and keep going until you tell me when to stop. If you don't tell me when to stop, then I just keep going. Max width is what we're doing now because we built it for mobile. I'm sorry, we built it for desktop and now we're backtracking for mobile. So I have to hit a breakpoint and say, all right, it starts at 768 and then it ends, right? Or it ends at 768. So anything before that is our design. It ends at 425, so anything before that is part of our design, okay? That's the difference. You started with mobile, this is what you use. If you started with desktop, this is what you use. Okay, so this would have been mobile first. This is what I would be using. This is if you built it out as desktop first, then I have to do max width and kind of work my way back. I prefer that you do this. Think of your mobile design. It's just gonna make it easier for you. But either way, you can make work. If you did desktop and you're like, I like desktop and I'm gonna work my way back, do whatever you want. I'm just saying, some of the styling can go across from mobile and be for everything. So why not try to hit everything that you can, and it'll only make the changes on the media sizes that you need to, right? Okay, I think we covered all these, right? All right, so There is the third one if you wanted to work on it. We're not going to do it now, but I'll Slack this out so you have that third design. If you wanted to work on it on your own, but you'll see the design and then you can work on the other ones. What are we doing here? Time permitting? Yeah, we didn't have time permitting. Exit tickets. Just fill out an exit ticket. And once again, if, you know, whatever the score was, just give me some feedback so I know where it is we can improve. If you're like, we should have done the first layout first, which we all know as of right now that should have been the case.